Hello everybody out there in Streamland, live Streamland. Is that a place? Live Streamland. Welcome to the stream. Another in my how to draw live stream series that's going on while everybody is stuck at home. Let's get this notice down and get it going. All right. No longer starting soon. We are starting now. So yeah, so basically we have been so far this week concerned with how to draw three-dimensionally and three-dimensional shapes. Today we are going to jump into learning how to do not only 3D shapes in terms of their outlines, but the lighting and shading that can make them look even more realistic. So what I'm going to do to start this is draw some more shapes that we've been doing this week, and then we're going to apply some shading to them and talk about some different shading techniques. So here we go. We got some basic things down, and there's a few different ways to approach shading, and it kind of depends on whether you're drawing. Put this up here in case anybody needs notes. Or whether you're painting. And the distinction I make here, and there's lots of different tools out there, and I'm not talking about tools when I say drawing versus painting. I'm talking about whether you're making your image with lines or whether you're making your image with shades. So that would be more like this. This is painting. This is drawing, if that makes sense. So tones and shades and gradients and all of that versus making your drawing out of lines. Drawing versus painting. And they're very distinct disciplines. You can have both of those disciplines in the same artwork. That's totally possible, doable, and I actually do that often in my work, and I enjoy it. But there are definitely different ways to approach it. So basically, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show some shading techniques, both drawing and painting ones. And we'll do the sphere last because that's kind of the hardest. Well, not the hardest, but I don't know. I think beginners find it hard. So here's what we want to think about. We'll do drawing techniques first, and there's a few techniques that we can look at. And I'll start with my favorite, which is called hatching. Hatching is basically parallel lines like that. And what we do with those is you can do fewer of them, farther apart and thinner, and it's lighter. And you can do closer together and thicker, and it's darker. So you can see light, medium, dark. There you go. So if we're looking at this cube here and we say, well, let's say the light is coming from the top like this, but also kind of the front, so the top and the front. What's going to happen is this spot's going to be the lightest. This spot's going to be this side's going to be a little darker, and this side's going to be the darkest. So this side is in shadow. If I wanted to do this like very, very technically, I could actually use a ruler. I'm going to make my lines even darker because this is the darkest, not darker, but thicker. So what I'm doing here is just doing some very regular, very kind of technical drawing, sort of hatching. It's nice and clean and it's cool. But one thing to notice, and this is a good habit, you don't have to do this, but you may notice that the lines I do go along the direction of the surface. Now, what I probably would do with this other side is actually turn them and do them in a different direction. And this is just an artistic choice. You don't have to do it this way. you can have these lines go in whatever direction you want. But some certain directions tend to be more easily identifiable by people. So it all depends on what you're going for. So there we go. We have the lightest area, slightly darker area, and an even darker area. So now we have a box that has some light shining on it. Isn't that nice? Mostly from the top. Here's another method of drawing. There's hatching, and then you'll see this a lot in learning to draw books and stuff like that. Classic drawing talks about cross-hatching. Hatch. Can I spell? There we go. Hatching. I can spell. So basically, cross-hatching is just hatching, like you see over here. So we have some lines, and then if you want that to get darker, you would then do another set of lines crossing the lines you've already done. And then if you wanted to get darker still, you can do even more lines. And then darker still, you could do even more lines. So now you're getting a gradient from light to dark. You can see right there, cross-hatching. So if we were to think of the light as being the same on here, you know what, let's do it from over here. We'll do the light on this one different. We'll do the light coming in from this direction, right here. So if we're doing light here, what we want to think about with respect to this cylinder is probably following the roundness of it around this way. Following that curve is kind of a good practice. Again, you don't have to do that, but it is a good practice. You could do it totally random, or you can follow the form. So I think what I might do, you know what I'll do? Let's split this guy in two. We'll do it both ways on the same cylinder. Here, we'll give it a label, like it's a can of beans or something. So I'm gonna do up here. I'm just gonna do hatching that is totally cross-hatching, I should say, not hatching, but cross-hatching that is just totally independent of the actual can itself. Can, I'm already calling it a can. So basically, the darkest spot should be around here, a little lighter, and then the lightest side is here, and then maybe we'd see a little bit of dark starting to happen on the edge there. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do and also how far apart your lines are definitely affects how dark it is. So these are pretty loose and far apart. So then what I want to do is have a zone now where the lines are crossing that. So this is a very super traditional crosshatch where the lines are just totally independent of the form. I very rarely do this in regular drawing, but it's important to see it because it gets the point across. So now we want an even darker zone back here. I'm going to do another layer of crosshatching. It's getting darker, it's getting darker. Now I'm going to do another layer going right here at the darkest spot. Right there. So there you can see we've got some gradation from light to dark. Very basic stuff. If you can do this on this little drawing of a cylinder, you can do this on any drawing you might possibly want to. Okay, so I talked earlier about following the form of the can rather than, this is somewhat arbitrary in terms of the lines. If we follow the form of the lines of the can, those lines would be parallel to this, but they would also be parallel to the curve of the can. So this is a conventional way of doing things. Again, you don't have to do it this way, but I find that I like to do things this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some hatching, and this is going to be a little more loose and a little more organic, but I'm going to do a little bit there. I'm going to do some more over here. These are almost a little darker. I'm hitting it just a little harder than I did. And then I'm going to do more lines. See, now I'm going with the can this way. These I'm going to kind of fade out like that. So you get really far apart there. But now I'm going to come back, and in the darker part of the can, I'm going to do like another layer here. Be careful about how you do it. Really start darkening up. When it comes to cross-hatching, you can kind of do whatever you want. I mean, you don't have to do the perfect little grid pattern here. So there's an example. I went outside the lines. Erase a little bit. So there's an example of really kind of just building it up, following the lines of the form of the object. And that further supports the volume. So two different ways to do cross-hatching there. Okay, so the sphere. So let me go into just in general how to shade a sphere. Let's say that we're going to have the light coming in. We'll do the same as the cylinder, coming in this way, sort of from the front and from the top. What you have with a sphere is the lightest area is going to be kind of up here, then it's going to be at medium, and then darker and darker as you go back here, and it's going to follow the contour of the sphere, always getting away like that. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to do I'm going to show, I've shown hatching, I've shown cross hatching. You can do both of those with the sphere. It would be, you know, a lot like this. I'm going to show you that you don't necessarily, I guess technically what I'm about to do is technically cross hatching, but it doesn't have to be quite so rigid. You can just put down marks in just almost random kind of patterns or any sort of texture that you can kind of make. I'm just kind of doing squiggles right now. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing squiggles. But what I'm doing is sort of steering away from the lighter area and coming around to the darker areas. This area is medium. This area is darker, darker still. So this just goes to show almost any kind of mark that you can make, you know, pencil, ink, whatever, paper, or computer. I'm on the computer right now, just imitating paper pencil drawing. You can see there that I'm just building up a value, a gradation. And that's all just using a line. There's no blending or paint or anything of that nature involved here. This is just drawing with squiggles. Just to show you that it can be done. And the way this works is sort of the more I'm building up, the darker it is. You know, it's back and forth, mark making. It's exactly the same idea as cross-hatching. It's just not geometric lines going this way and that way and all that sort of stuff. There we go. Oh, I realized I never drew the outline of the circle. Let's do that so it doesn't look too bad. Hey, look at that circle. Oh, got outside the line a little. Boop, boop, boop. So there we go. So there's a sphere. And three different ways. What would we call this? This would be, I don't know. This is lines, however. However you want. I like that one. That's my favorite. So anyway, there's three different ways to do shading on some basic objects. And again, if you can do shading on three objects like this, you can do shading on anything. It's just this, it's just these things over and over and over and over again. So now okay, we've talked about drawing versus painting. See here, we've talked about this. Move it up there. Looks better up there. We've talked about that a little bit. Let's get rid of this stuff. And now I want to use these same 3 shapes down here and show what a painted version might be like. So why don't we start with the square or cube. So same thing, here's the light. We're just going to copy the light from here. It's sort of coming from the top and from the side. Now I'm going to be playing around a little bit with values here, because when you're painting, that's what you do. You play around with values. So what I'm going to do is pick kind of a pretty dark tone for the darkest side. Oh, that might be a little too dark. You know, let's just go with this as the darkest. This should be darkest. That's plenty. And I probably ought to not be so messy. All right, there we go. Just kind of fill this in. So this geometric shape is exactly what you might expect. It's sort of solid colors. We're not going to do any blending or anything here to create these. We're just going to fill them in with an appropriate shade. I realize I kind of messed up the back here. There's my ruler. Make it straight. Must be straight. Ooh, that's nice and straight. Okay, so now I'm going to take this tone right here. You guys can see the color picker there. And I'm going to lighten it up a fair bit. About there. And then come and fill this in. So here you can already see one of the main differences between drawing and painting. Drawing, you use lines, usually of the same tone or color. You know, it's a pencil line, it's an ink line, to fool the eye into seeing different shades. But when you're painting, you're actually using those different shades. And some would argue that makes painting a superior art form, but I don't buy into things like that. So here I'm going to grab this color again, and I'm going to go even lighter, not quite white, but close to it, And I'm going to come up here, go along here. I have to get my brush real small, get in those corners, they're tight corners. There we go. So now, oh boy, that was a little messy. So now we basically have the same form, the exact same size, but this is rendered sort of in a painterly way. Lightest color, lightest shade on top, a little bit darker on this side, a little bit darker on this side. Now, if we were to move our light source from here, if we moved it back here, if it was coming from behind, then this over here would then become the darkest area because it's furthest from the light. All right, let's get rid of this. We don't need these arrows, confusing people. So many arrows. So, okay, let's now take this idea and we're going to look at the cylinder. Cylinder. I'm going to give it, just like the light here, I'm going to give it a nice light top. That's where the most light is hitting. Right there. But also right here along this edge is the lightest tone. Now, probably out to there, I'm gonna say. Yeah, something like that. Then I'm gonna grab this middle tone. I'm gonna put that right here and here, over to about there. Now I'm just blocking in colors here. Again, I'm not using line to create tones. I'm actually changing the tone of the media that I'm putting down. In this case, it's digital, but it could be paint or watercolor paints or pastels. It could be anything. Charcoal. Charcoal's one that works like this. Put down various degrees of shades. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to come back in here and kind of put the medium tone at the back again. So basically the darkest spot is over here along this edge. furthest from the lightest spot, which is right there. Now, I've done this in big color blocks, which is certainly one way to go. But obviously, most paintings and things you see, this is sort of blended. This doesn't look like this. It's a gradient. So now I'm going to turn this into a gradient by actually doing some digital painting. And essentially what's happening here is I'm doing some blending to kind of show a gradient from light to dark. There we go. Yeah, that's I mean, hey, that's okay. It's not terrible. Done worse. You could spend a lot of time doing blending like this, and there's definitely a skill to it, definitely. But there you can see we've now got a painted can, lightest area here going to the darkest area there. And if we come over here to the sphere, there's a similar kind of thing. We're going to have our lightest area. Oh, let me go back to my other brush. There we go. We have our lightest area up here. We're going to have sort of medium area taken up the most. And you can see I'm just sort of really starting out and doing this. I'm just kind of blocking stuff in. I'm just saying about here will be this kind of level of darkness. And then under here, it's going to be where it's dark down there. So I know you can probably wondering, why are you putting that down there? And that's from a more advanced lesson where we learn about how objects often pick up always pick up reflected light off of whatever they're sitting on. So if this sphere is sitting on a white surface, it's going to pick up some light along the bottom of it. Actually, not just a white surface, any surface that's lighter than the ball is. There we go. Get a little blending going on here. What I find to be kind of a good way to go sometimes with stuff on a circle is to actually move my brush in a circular motion. I don't know why, but that just kind of helps. Kind of helps me out. I like it. So basically, we're doing the same thing as we just did on the cylinder, but we're doing it on a sphere. Same idea, following the contours. Following the contours of the shape. Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. It's a little messy here at the back. But yeah, so this right here sort of shows that the sphere is picking up a little bit of light off the surface it's sitting on. And really we ought to be thinking about stuff like putting a shadow underneath of this sphere, you know, something along the lines of that. But we're not going to get into that today. That shadow is actually too small, but anyway, you get the point. So this surface right here will reflect off the back of that sphere, and it's also true of all of these shapes. It's just it's a little more noticeable on a circle. I don't know why that is, but I always notice it more on spheres and round objects, a little bit more than geometric ones. But it is there on geometric ones if you look for it. So there we go. Now we have painterly objects rendered out for you. So there is different ways to tackle shading, and these are very basic shapes, obviously, but it also applies to almost anything you might want to draw. I think that's going to be all for today's live stream. I hope you guys enjoyed that. You guys should practice, do some shading of your own. Try those basic shapes, cylinders and cones, and I didn't do a cone today, but cylinders and cubes and spheres. Give all of those some practice and see how well you can do at it. The more you practice, the better you'll get. Please feel free to come back tomorrow. This live stream is happening daily at 10 a.m. Eastern. Tomorrow's topic will be something a little more fun. It's been very basic lesson, drawing cubes, plotting out all this kind of stuff this week. I think tomorrow we'll do something a little more fun. For right now, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please feel free to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. I am NinjaJ03 on all those platforms. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you tune in again. Have a great morning.